Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to BBZ Poker. So today we're going to talk about some general strategies to improve the odds of success as a professional poker player, but as a semi-professional poker player, or hopefully for people that are doing something else as well. This is a presentation that I gave to the BBZ community some time ago, and the feedback was really good, and I just thought that it would be helpful to a broader audience, and so here we go. So the first kind of thing that we started talking about was that I think you should basically begin with the end in mind. Okay, so you start by thinking about what you want to have, what you don't want to have, and use that to dictate how you act. So essentially, like, what do I want, and what behaviors or habits or routines would simplify or optimize my path to getting there, right? So this is just like blank slate, open paper. You don't need to be like held down by like the way that you would define yourself right now. It's just really simply like just writing down on a piece of paper, what do I want and what'll help me get there. So, you've got 168 hours in a week. You've got to sleep for 56 of them, roughly. And you can start mapping things out in terms of how much time you have left with the 112 hours, but also, you have other commitments, got to shower, whatever. So you can start mapping things, right? And you can start micro and go broader, but write things down, reflect in terms of, again, like, what do I want and what would make accomplishing whatever goal I have in front of me easier? Like, how would I design a robot to get the job done, right? So then the next thing would be, like, what do I want to stay away from? Okay. And you do the same thing. So this is going to be more personal, where you start to say, like, okay, like, what is it about me that if I was looking at the top down at myself, right, what things are getting in my way, if that I could just, like, if I could just make them disappear, I would be better off, right? And so this requires uncompromising honesty about, like, whatever weaknesses you have. So, like, if you smoke cigarettes, if you drink alcohol and you get hangovers and things like that, and it slows you down. I had a problem where, like, every time I would drink, I would get hangovers that were, like, really bad, and they would, like, take me out for, like, 1 or 2 days. Like, you could say I was drinking way too much if that was the case, but that was the truth. And so I just stopped drinking. But whatever the case may be, like, whatever your weaknesses are, as you would define them, things that are getting in your way when it comes to accomplishing whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, write them down. Like, you're not getting rid of them right now. Just write those things down, right? And then obviously, like, the question that follows once you've finished the exercise is, why can't you obtain all of the behaviors that would help you accomplish whatever it is that you want? And why can't you eliminate all of the behaviors that are in your way? Now, maybe that's easier said than done. It's easier to write them down than it is to adopt those behaviors or eliminate them, obviously. But with time and persistence, like, you can accomplish it. I mean, it's not impossible. It's not impossible to quit smoking. Like, it's not impossible to stop drinking. It's not impossible to exercise every day. Like, it's not easy. Otherwise, we would all do those things. We all know that they're good for us or bad for us or whatever. But it's doable. Just takes time. So the next thing is, and I'm not a scientist, okay? So, like, I just, I read books, I get ideas, and that's it. But, like, so these aren't necessarily my ideas, but they shape the way that I think and view the world, okay? So there's an idea about, like, cumulative advantage and, reinforcing feedback loops. And, the idea is that winning kind of, like, leads to winning, and winning is often, or at least more often, about the accumulation of, like, tiny invisible edges that can compound over long periods of time. So, for example, you can see in professional sports clustering around certain cutoff dates for birthdays, because when they first started playing, they were bigger than everyone else. And then that led to reinforcement from their parents and their coaches and their teachers, because they were better than everyone else because they were bigger. And that process playing out over time can lead to, like, basically a clustering in professional sports around, like, cutoff dates for birthdays and things like that. And it can also lead to, like, basically an absence of people who are systematically, like, almost 11 months younger than everyone else in professional sports. But you can see that type of thing play out in poker, for example. So you can see in poker, someone who, like, has really early success, someone who runs really hot at the beginning of their career, is more likely to play a lot, is more likely to, by playing a lot, be noticed by other players, and then have conversations that are higher level poker conversations. They're encouraged, so, like, they take some of that money and they reinvest it into studying, more than someone who just didn't have that success. And that's just chance. That's just dumb luck. But it's real. It happens. So you have to acknowledge it, that this, like, this accumulation of little tiny small edges really matters. And what that means is that you should take those types of small edges seriously, right? Yeah. So, like, where do we go from here? So 50%, so I've got some notes, and I'm going to stumble a little bit because this was a bit of a long presentation. But 50% of maximum output doesn't get you 50% of the results. This is something that's really important. Basically, most people that I know think linearly about accomplishing things or working or making a living or whatever, and it's not really very helpful for competitive endeavors, but it's not even that helpful normally. So the bottom line is, like, if you evaluate anyone, like, we can take people that aren't myself. You can evaluate someone like John Van Fleet, Ape Styles, who's in BBZ. You can evaluate someone like Phil Galfond. Like, it doesn't matter. But whoever it is that you choose to look at, if that person worked half as hard, do you think that person would have had half as much success? Obviously not. They wouldn't have had any of it. I mean, like, it was an all or nothing kind of deal. Either they put everything that they had into it, right? You know, professional sports is the same thing, right? Like, if those professional athletes put in half of the work, they don't get to be like a professional athlete with half the salary. They just don't get to be a professional athlete. They're just going to go get a job and do something else entirely. So there are a lot of things that are all or nothing. You either go like 100% top speed at them, and you get the result that's associated with that, or you get nothing. Okay, and poker is a competition. So if you make the mistake of behaving as though everything is linear and just like, basically, I guess like another way of thinking about it, right, for you guys is you're getting paid an awful lot of money for the last 10 hours of work. It's kind of like working out, right? Like, there's like the idea of going to failure when you're lifting weights. So you can, when you lift weights, if you just lift and you just, you decide, like, I'm going to do, I don't know, like a really light weight, and I'm going to do sets of 5, right? Or something super easy where you just throw the weights up and down and then you put them down and you're done. Like, you literally got nothing out of that. All of the juice comes from, like, when it gets really hard. That's where you get all of the return for your time and your investment, right? So like the first, if you're using light weights, like the first 20 reps don't count. They don't do anything. It's the last like 10 reps or 15 reps, depending on, like, I guess what you're doing. But hopefully the point's not lost, right? Like, all of the money in this case for poker comes from going from working like 40 hours a week to 50, or going from 50 to 55, or from 55 to 60, or like whatever the case may be. And I'm not saying that like balance isn't important, because I can feel the balance dorks calling me out. I love you guys, but yeah, it's just important to understand that there are some things in life where literally 100% of the return comes from the last like bit of the grind that other people miss or don't put in, and you need to make sure that you're taking advantage of that as often as possible. Okay, so now moving on to like one of the next points, we're going to get into some money talks. And so here we're talking about like personal finance, basically as an edge in poker. So most people, particularly in poker, are bad with money. There are a lot of examples where poker players have essentially, like, we've decided as an industry to like glorify everyone who goes broke like 7 times or something. I think it's moronic, but we do it, whatever we do. And as a result, I think that like it's not really pounded into people that it's really advantageous as a professional poker player to have good money habits. And there's a blog, Mr. Money Mustache. There's a like movement called FIRE. You can Google it and look into it if you want. I would highly recommend Mr. Money Mustache. Mr. Money Mustache is an easier way to get into it. I'd highly recommend reading all his content. It's better content than anything that I put out. So I would check some of that stuff out. But essentially, like, the idea as it relates to poker players is that opportunities for good bets inevitably come up, and it's important that you not only recognize them, but that you have the access to capital that's required to take advantage of them. So if you're starved for money, like, you can't travel to the WSOP. If you're, when there's no COVID going on, when there's good opportunities to invest in poker players, maybe you've got a buddy who's really good and he wants to play like a 1K WPT main event, which was a great tournament, 5 million guaranteed, tons of money, tons of action, etc. And he wanted to sell you half of it, and he was going to sell it to you with no markup, just because like he wanted to play, and you're his buddy, and like you don't have the $500 to give him, and so like he gets the money, he does a bunch of work, and he scrounges up the money from someone else, and he's, he would have rather you had the action than he fucking wins the tournament. So like that's not a great way to judge outcomes, but nonetheless, like, opportunities come up, and if you miss them because you're starved for capital, like, it sucks. And so you can help avoid that by preparing when things are going well, which is like a very common practice everywhere else in the world, but just, I guess, not in poker. So most people in this industry, I just think, burn through capital way too quickly, and they're not great models for how to behave. And so, like, hopefully this just gets you thinking about that a little bit more. Obviously, you need to focus on what you can control, right? So your financial situation in poker is not always something you can control, but you can control how the money's going out, right? You can control volume, okay? You can control your study habits, you can control your game selection, you can control your diet, your exercise. So it's just, it all ties together. It's not that only money is important. It's not that only something else is important. But in my opinion, if you can't tie all of it together, something is going to break. In order to make the entire process sustainable as an individual playing full time, you're going to probably need all of it. You can't play long sessions if you're treating your body badly. You're not going to get the most, the bottom line is to win a tournament requires being alert and highly focused after 9 hours of thinking, because that's when all the money is getting decided. Again, to go back to the previous example, all of the most important decisions you're going to make are being made after you've already put in maybe 9 hours of work, and you might have woken up 2 hours or 3 hours before the session started. So after you've been awake for 12 hours. So if you're not treating your body well, you're not eating the right food, you're not exercising, etc., that's going to be a problem sometimes. I'm not saying you can't do it and be unhealthy. Of course you can. There are plenty of examples, but it helps. And it's a game of small edges. Small edges matter. And so if you're trying to just get them all, which is how I think about things, then that's one that you should go get. I'm going to show you my screen really quickly. So these are some simulations using, these aren't some simulations. This is not a simulation at all. These are two graphs of my team, okay? So this is just BBZ average. This is just how I'm trying to help you to think about it. So this is my team of staked players. Both are my teams of staked players, okay? And when you aggregate all of their results, you basically get a player that would be called BBZ average. So this is BBZ average, and this is BBZ average player playing for 15,000 games, and this is also BBZ average player playing for 15,000 games. And obviously, we really like graph A, and we really don't like graph B. The problem is both graph A and graph B both belong to the same BBZ average player, and as a result, both of these are entirely possible for someone on my team who I back. Now this is actually not acceptable. This second one over here is really not acceptable. And as we do this work, we spend a lot of time trying to reduce the magnitude of these downswings for people on our team. We do that with a number of different mechanisms that aren't worth getting into. But it's important to basically to take game selection seriously and to really be honest about the fact that if you're a professional player playing tournaments, it's possible that you lose. This is 15,000 game block. So in a 15,000 game block, how long does it take to play that many games? It takes the average person at least a year and a half to put in this much work. So you could get either one of these two outcomes after putting in a year and a half of serious dedicated work, studying and all the rest of it. These players are winning for more than 6.5 big blinds per 100. This BBZ average player here is winning for more than 6.5 big blinds per 100, which is a very, very healthy win rate. So it's not like that's not the problem. It's not that they're not winning. It's just the volatility that they go through. And the reason it says simulations using poker dope at the top is because you can go to, which has now changed its name to Prime Dope. You can go to primedope.com and you can run simulations for what your assumptions are around your win rate and the types of games you're playing, and you can see what's possible for you. And it's just really important to prepare for the worst case scenario and to blunt it, okay? And so the way to blunt it as a tournament player would be to to sell action to some of the buy-ins at the top of your schedule. It would be to maybe tighten the schedule band so you're playing a tighter band of tournaments so that you're not winning $11 tournaments and losing $10,000 tournaments, for example, to be extreme. But it's just important to understand, look, this can happen. This can happen to a solid winner. You could be either one of these two guys at the end of a year and a half, and it's not your fault. This is just, it is your fault, but this is predictable, and this is a part of the grind. And if that's the case, for most people, this is how much money you lost after a year and a half. You still have to come out of this. So you're not. It might be 3 years before you break even, and that's too much of a commitment for most people. And so what that means is it's basically necessary to come up with strategies to blunt this as an outcome, right? You don't need to pretend like it's not real and stick your head in the sand and then just get emotionally devastated by a bad outcome. You can control for a better outcome, right? So yeah, optimizing game selection, selling action, those are some of the main things. Not overestimating your edge, that's really important. I don't know, like etc. I guess it's important to acknowledge that you don't know a lot of the time, especially like when you're playing, but also when you're tackling something big, like how to manage your whole life and your career. And so when it comes to playing, you're basically triangulating truth based on crude tools. It doesn't matter what tool is, and you're going to have imperfect execution as well. And so that's going to mean that, like, at various points your confidence is going to be vulnerable, and the time to prepare for those uncomfortable feelings will be when things are going well and you actually have the capital. Like, once you start to get crushed and lose the money and you're a year and a half in, it's too fucking late. Like, you can't do, like, it's too late. You can't fix it now. The time to fix it was before everything broke. So, to some extent, this is the guys that are running real hot right now. Like, when you're running really well, that's when you should be paranoid and, like, starting to make plans for things to roll over. Yeah, so I have a lot of physical cues in my house, actually. Like, this is kind of off topic, but like as like reminders that when things are going well, like, you need to prep. And winter's coming, or like little statues of like little bears and things that like I like that, like those like little tiny physical cues that like prepare for hibernation, prepare for winter, like whatever, however you want to think about it. Like when it's sunshine and rainbows, it's hard not to focus on the sunshine and rainbows. You get an emotional high, life's good, you got money, you want to spend it, life's just better. And then when you're losing and you're in hell, you just can't do anything about it. Like, it sucks to say that, but it's like, it's much harder it's not impossible, but it's much harder to do something about it when you're actually in hell. The time to prepare for hell was when you weren't there. So yeah, from my perspective, it's really important to think about it that way. So make sure you're setting aside money and stuff like that, and not getting overexposed to these series that we've been shown by the poker sites can just be strung together. Like, they can just stitch, like a PowerFest Scoop, WPT, WSOP Online, PowerFest, WCoop. Like, they can stitch all of these series together and you get no break. And so, I think it's a big deal to make sure that to manage your exposure and not just be like, well, I've got 100K, so I'm going through 100K in buy-ins during Scoop. Like, lots of luck. So rigorous study habits are really important for dealing with everything that's going on. Like, rigorous study habits are important for dealing with and preparing for those inevitable downswings, right? So we've got the BBZ seminars, we've got the CFP program for people. Obviously, I do one-on-one coaching. I'm less available now. My schedule is getting kind of booked out months in advance. It's not an exaggeration. I refuse to raise prices, so that's why that's happening. You can use tools, PO Solver, Range Converter, ICMizer. Matt Jonda has books. I have no affiliation with that guy, but his books are great. You can do database analysis with me or someone else. There's training sites like BBZpoker.com. You just gotta, you've got to be studying. You've got to be on top of things. Again, like, you want to be, in my opinion, like when it's smooth sailing, you need to be thinking about, like, what else can I be doing to fortify myself against this winter that's going to come for me, because it's inevitable. Like, it's seasonal. If you want to call it seasonal, it's cyclical. If you want to call it cyclical, I really don't care. Like, the bottom line is winning doesn't last forever. It just doesn't. Like, there's no one that I know that just always wins. So, you got to prepare for when you're going to lose. And, you can write, you can reflect, you can do self-directed learning with, like, Khan Academy, which I've talked about on stream. I like reading books, and, the bottom line is you've got to enjoy the process. I'm not trying to be doomy and gloomy, because it's not. It's fun. It's just, like, for some people who don't prepare properly, they end up not enjoying the process because they find themselves drowning. And again, like, the time to prep was when things were going well. And if you're in hell right now and you're trying to fix it, what you need to do now is focus on the things you can control, right? Which won't be the swing itself. It'll be you, right? So it'll be those habits that we talked about in the beginning. So anyways, I really appreciate you guys hanging out and watching this video. Make sure you subscribe if you want more like this one, and have a good day. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.